We don't have an official war, we have some special military operation. It is not clear to our troops for what exactly they have to go to war and receive serious injuries. Our troops are more afraid of the enemy than their own commanders. That is, they are not afraid to be imprisoned. After all, how bad is it to go to prison when alternatively 155mm artillery shells are raining all over you, while arms and legs are ripped off in front of your eyes, and you have nowhere to hide? In that context, 5 years in prison don't seem that bad anymore. Hello, dear friends of freedom. What you are about to see are some fragments of a new public statement of the notorious terrorist, war criminal, ex-FSB agent and former military commander of the entire separatist forces in the Donbas region, Igor Girkin, aka Igor Strelkov. Despite being fairly intelligent and experienced in a military sense, Girkin is also pathologically obsessed by the wrongful idea that the Ukrainian nation, culture, ethnicity does not or should not exist, and that Ukraine should not be an independent country, but rather under the Kremlin's control. Girkin has gained a large audience in Russia during this war because, unlike most other influential pro-Russian voices, he's not echoing the typical Kremlin-approved Russian propaganda. Instead, he gained the reputation of expressing his authentic personal opinion about the situation in Ukraine. Girkin is responsible for the death of almost 300 people during the shoot-down of the commercial airplane MH17 with a Russian anti-aircraft missile, as well as for the killings of countless Ukrainian defenders. Girkin personally acknowledged to be the one who pulled the trigger of the war in eastern Ukraine in 2014 by illegally crossing the Ukrainian border with his unit, which was heavily armed and supported by the Russian government, and by shooting at anyone who was resisting their Russian invasion. Let's take a look. You have to understand the psychology of Russian officials, particularly Russian military officials. I myself have been a military official for 16 years within the Russian FSB, and during these 16 years I was able to find out how decisions are made in Russia. Senior officials are concluding a meeting. During this meeting, they work on a plan. According to the plan, everything has to happen this way and that way. However, the actions of the enemy are not considered at all, or maybe they are considered, but only in the predefined context of the worked-out plan. But the possibility that the enemy is aware of that plan and might act differently is not considered at all. The same has happened with this so-called regrouping. Right now, we have offensives going on in Bakhmut and Ugledar. We are attacking and the enemy is in the defense. But if the enemy should somewhere once more start an offensive action, this will again be a surprise for us, because it is not considered by the military Russian leadership. A question from the audience. Isn't it too early to talk about offensives? Their tanks haven't even arrived yet. Yes, the tanks aren't there yet, and the conditions of the Ukrainian army isn't very good at the moment. You shouldn't see them as some kind of soldiers with unnatural superpowers. Ukrainian soldiers are fighting well when they are in the defense, just like any other Russian soldier. After all, they are Russian people. Even if some of them speak Ukrainian, they are still Russian soldiers with the same type of psychology. That is, they are good at defending and ready to fight for their own collective, while being completely brainwashed. I assume that once they will receive those tanks, they will start to create offensive corps, and they will make use of them somewhere. But right now, it is not easy for them to do so, since after 11 months, their best troops are already neutralized pretty well. They also don't have a great situation when it comes to weapons and ammunition, and the West is giving them exactly as much as they need to not die out immediately. The West doesn't need Ukraine's victory. The West doesn't need Russia to be faced with Ukrainian tanks rolling into Sevastopol, which is the biggest city on Crimea, or Rostov-on-Don. The West needs a long, boring, bloody war in which as many Russians as possible on both sides will die. I've talked about this since 2014. And we have not just fallen into this trap. It was as if this was our only option, without any alternatives. They will get tanks and they will carry out offensive operations. And the frog will be boiled slowly, the frog being the Russian Federation in that case. If Ukraine is weakened too fast, it will receive more, including combat aircrafts. If Ukraine is about to crumble, Poles will appear on the battlefield in large quantities. Question from the audience. And so far they aren't there in large quantities? So far we are talking about a couple of companies and battalions, but not about corpses and divisions. So if we draw the analogy to the Spanish Civil War, the 4 Italian divisions have not arrived yet. But in this kind of war, with the red lines we are showing them, there's no reason for them not to join. They will just join as volunteers sooner or later. Right now, the West thinks that 300 tanks will allow Ukraine to survive until the summer and make us bleed quite a bit. Not more than that. They don't want to give them more. Question from the audience. How high do you estimate the chances of a direct military confrontation with the NATO alliance? I believe that NATO will only join this war if, or rather when, they will assess Russia as completely weakened, so at the final stage of the war. How did the Americans always try to fight? In any situation in Europe, they only started to join the war when the enemy was already barely breathing, so they could get the best possible result with the lowest amount of human losses. As long as this is not the case, NATO will not join the fight. The ineffectiveness of our government has become obvious to everyone. The ineffectiveness of our army during the first serious crisis has revealed everything I have been talking about in the last 20 years. All problems were swept under the rug. The elite was living at the expense of the resources and the robbery of our country, while the rest of the population received some pocket money in the form of cheap mortgages and credits, while having a relatively acceptable living standard. But then the crisis arrived, and it turned out that no one was able or willing to do anything. Everyone was used to living without putting too much effort into things. Under Putin, the whole country wasn't doing anything exhausting and assumed that this state would continue indefinitely. And then the war came, and it turned out that nobody was able to do anything. Our own national production industry has been completely destroyed. It turned out that without imported components, we aren't able to produce anything on our own. I will not even mention the problems with our generals and officials, as these should be obvious to everyone by now. However, it all comes down to the fact that if we won't even try, we will definitely lose this war. Then they will divide our country, as they have planned, in at least 12 parts. I think in the end it will be even more than that, much more, perhaps about 30. Everything will fall apart, and we will wage war amongst ourselves. Without a complete mobilization of the entire country and its economy, we will not be able to collect, equip, and train new troops. Instead, we will, just like last time, send them to the battlefield and just abandon them there, while someone will report that the mobilization was successfully concluded. This will be followed by riots of the reservists and a 1917-like uprising. Yes, this is a very possible scenario. But if we simply don't do anything, we will not win this war. We will simply not win, and that's it. Yes, Ukraine is doing everything they can. Yes, they are grabbing people on the streets. We can see that. People there also don't want to go to war. Yes, they have big losses, but ours aren't small either. It's just that they have a smaller population, less people, and therefore their losses are much more noticeable. But they are fighting this war in a serious manner, while we are still waiting for something. Sooner or later, we will be forced to fight seriously too. Which brings us back to the question which I find crucial: a real proper mobilization, a proper preparation for war. With that kind of leadership is indeed not realizable. And by the way, this leadership understands that fact perfectly well too. This is why they have applied the handbrake on all mobilization activities and now just hope that everything will somehow fall into place. Look, if our entire army would be combat ready, it would be able to carry out offensive operations not on one or two small locations. One offensive is currently carried out by the elite Marine Brigade, which was already forced to replace their entire staff after the Battle of Mariupol. They simply have a strong leadership of effective officers that were able to revive their entire brigade, and now they carry out attacks on Vuhledar. And apart from that, we only have PMC Wagner on the offense, where they have an iron discipline, where not following orders is handled with executions. This is a fact. Why do I keep saying that this is an excellent assault ground force? Because they really implement a proper military discipline. But apart from them, we cannot find this in any other unit. No military discipline. I could tell you quite a lot of interesting facts which I encountered during my 2 months at the front line, but I will not do that. Not because I'm afraid or something, but because I really believe that I should not make them public, since the enemy will make use of it and implement it in their propaganda. However, I am more than aware of the negative mood that is omnipresent amongst our troops, and this is due to what I keep talking about. We don't have an official war. We have some unclear status of a special military operation. It is not clear to our troops for what exactly they have to go to war and receive serious injuries. Our troops are more afraid of the enemy than their own commanders. That is, they are not afraid to be imprisoned. After all, how bad is it to go to prison when alternatively 155mm artillery shells are raining all over you, while arms and legs are ripped off in front of your eyes, and you have nowhere to hide? In that context, 5 years in prison don't seem that bad anymore, and it's not even clear if you will be imprisoned at all. If you manage to get a good lawyer, or have enough money to buy yourself out of prison, and if the entire company decides to disobey, good luck trying to imprison all of them. They won't do it. Because imprisoning an entire company will create a scandal. If the commander would report this, people will start smashing his head. This is why it is most likely that the commander will simply not report that the company is not following his orders, and the commander also does not understand what the purpose and final goal of this war is. The usage of nuclear weapons by the Russian Federation against Ukraine in any form, even in the smallest variant, to destroy a bridge, for example, will lead to Ukraine receiving nuclear weapons within the following 2 weeks, and they will use them against us. And Russians will start fighting against Russians not only with conventional weapons, but also with nuclear weapons. Do you want that? And on top of that, there wouldn't be a new formal reason to strike the US, since we were the first ones to use nuclear weapons. We still see Ukraine formally as an independent country within the Kremlin. Even after the past 11 months, nobody even dared to question the legitimacy of the Ukrainian government. We haven't even declared war on them. We have waged war for 11 months and haven't even declared a war on them. On what kind of legal basis could we justify the usage of nuclear weapons? And how should we avoid the consequences when Ukraine will receive nuclear weapons? I believe that it will take less than a month for them to receive nuclear weapons. On top of that, our result will be one destroyed bridge at most. We will not scare anyone with that. This will be a present for our dear Western partners. I'm honest with you. They are even waiting for it. They simply dream about us making this kind of stupid move. I'm sure that those people who say, let's strike those holes with nuclear weapons, are in fact stimulated, including financially, from forces abroad. It would be impossible to come up with something more stupid than that. I will once again draw the analogy. If you decide to get rid of cockroaches, you will probably not start to set your whole house on fire, but apply a different method instead. But if you are too lazy to make the effort of going into the shop to buy pesticides or traps, then yes, of course, you can also set your house on fire. It's just that you will burn together with your house and the cockroaches. A question from the audience. You have mentioned bridges. Many talk about the fact that we do not destroy them. Of course, we can't use nuclear weapons, but is there any other way for us to destroy them? In order to destroy bridges, we either need a large quantity of missiles, and I really mean a lot of them. We do not have that many. Apart from that, we would need those missiles to hit the target, which, by the way, is not certain to happen. I can give you an example based on open source information. After our dear Kiev partners have hit our base in Makiivka and liquidated a whole bunch of mobilized Russian troops, our side has made retaliation strikes on 2 positions in Kramatorsk. It's not clear what missiles they used, but as far as I know, they used Iskander ballistic missiles with a range of 500 kilometers, which are fairly accurate. And in both cases, those Iskander missiles have failed to hit the 2 large buildings on which they were targeted. So the fairy tales of Konashenkov, the spokesperson of the Russian Ministry of Defense, about 600 killed Ukrainian soldiers are not more than that. In the best case, you can cross out a 0 to get 60 killed Ukrainian troops. In Konashenkov's case, you should always cross out a zero. Why did they miss? Because we have bad rockets or incompetent personnel? No, we simply do not have a normal guidance system which is operated from space. The entire US-American satellite system is working for the targeting of HIMARS in Ukraine. This is why, when they were striking the Antonovsky Bridge at the Dnipro River in Kherson, they were able to strike the same spot multiple times with an accuracy of less than a meter and ended up making the bridge unusable. And that is despite the fact that the Soviet regime used to build extremely stable bridges that were designed to withstand nuclear attacks. And we don't have something like that. We cannot just hit the same position with our ultra-precise missiles like they do. The targets in Kramatorsk have been fairly close to the front line. The second method that could destroy bridges are aviation bombs, heavy aerial bombs such as the FAB models, with a weight of at least 500 kilograms or more. The 2,500 kilogram version, for example. These are special large bombs, which are designed for the destruction of large fortified buildings. But this would require our pilots to get close enough to the target and to drop the bomb from the right altitude, because our bombs are not guided. Yes, we have corrective bombs, but not self-guided ones. We just have started to produce those types of bombs. I know that the production has just started now, and they will be tested soon. Just 11 months after the start of the war. We started this war without having any of those types of bombs. Not a single one. Now there's a company that adds guiding wings to the existing FAB 250 kg bombs, another company to the 500 kg and another one to the 1000 kg version. Whichever are produced the fastest will be dropped first. They can be dropped roughly 70 kilometers away from the target and the bomb flies the rest on its own. But so far we have nothing and can't hit anything, because our planes would just be targeted by anti-aircraft systems, since we do not have air superiority anywhere, not at the front line and of course not behind it. This is why the armed forces of Ukraine can freely move troops around without worrying that they will be targeted. I wanted to say something regarding the last public statement of Prigozhin towards me. Quick side note, Ukrainian online newspaper Ukrainska Pravda wrote, background, on January 26, 2023, Evgeny Prigozhin, the founder of the private military company Wagner Group, invited Igor Girkin, aka Strelkov, to join his troops in Ukraine. In response, Strelkov offered to discuss the proposal. The terrorist Igor Girkin noted that he discussed a possible meeting with a trustee and representative of Prigozhin, Andrei Troshev, during a phone call, at which they could agree on his participation in the war as part of the PMC Wagner group on Friday, and Girkin even promised to come to Luhansk for a personal conversation within 2 days. One day after the phone call, in an address to Girkin that was published online, Prigozhin accused Girkin of surrendering Slavyansk in 2014, taking money from Akhmetov, Ukrainian's richest businessman, and repeatedly insults him and threatens to throw him into the hottest hell at the front line in case he joins PMC Wagner, where he will have to prove his reliability, and also threatened to, quote, pee in his face if he tries to flee the battlefield. I want to emphasize again that yesterday I have talked with Andrei Nikolaevich Troshev, Prigozhin's trustee, on the phone, and I wanted to emphasize that we were talking in a normal manner, despite his past public attacks towards me. The conversation was absolutely normal, and we agreed on meeting up in Luhansk within 2 days starting Monday, where we would be able to talk about the formal conditions of my participation in the PMC Wagner Group. Today's public statement of Prigozhin completely excluded the possibility of my participation in the PMC Wagner Group. That's it. What more can I say? The only thing that Mr. Prigozhin has done is to completely confirm the characteristics that I have stated about him earlier. There is nothing to add. I cannot say that I was particularly desperate to join PMC Wagner, but when I got invited, I honestly considered going. Why shouldn't I? After all, I did not insist on commanding an entire brigade or even a detachment. But if some Gobnik gang is telling me that they are going to have a trial against me, that they are going to interrogate and question me regarding what happened in 2014, with such accusations, I'm sorry, but if there really are such serious accusations against me, that I took money from Ukrainian billionaire Akhmetov, or something else, let the Federal Security Service deal with it. After all, there's a court, a prosecutor's office, military counterintelligence, anything, anything at all. But answering these kinds of questions from unknown people with unknown statuses, most of which I won't be able to answer without violating at least my own idea of secrecy and state secrets. I think this invitation to join Wagner has been expressed to me while Prigozhin was expecting that I would not show interest in joining. When he found out that I was seriously considering joining PMC Wagner, Mr. Prigozhin decided to make it impossible for me to join PMC Wagner, and he succeeded in doing so. A question from the audience: do you think that it was a pre-planned provocation all along? No, if this would be a provocation which was planned all along, it would have been made better, more civil and smarter. If Mr. Prigozhin planned this all along, he would not have made it look this way. That is, on one day, he offers me a commanding position, and directly on the next day, after I already practically gave an informal verbal agreement, he starts talking about some trials which some of his commanders will hold against me. And this message is accompanied by the most disrespectful vocabulary, an absolutely insulting one, and by accusations to which he has never been a witness. I indeed, for a short while, have seriously looked into a cooperation with PMC Wagner. Not because I like Prigozhin, but because this war is going on since 11 months and I cannot fight in it. And if this would have been my last chance to participate in combat activities. But I'm sorry, this is not a way to invite someone to serve. Just imagine what it would mean if I would agree to that offer now. It means that I would drive to a trial against me, held by God knows who. I can repeat again, yes, I considered PMC Wagner a combat effective instrument, which I have said already multiple times. Yes, PMC Wagner is being deployed in a way that makes this instrument practically useless. They have to break through a door, right behind which there is another door, and then another one, and so on, while having very high losses amongst their troops. Why? Because it is impossible to do it in any other way. Yes, it is possible that if they would be deployed in a different position along the front, with different tasks, while having the same combat potential, they could turn out to be 100 times more effective than now. We should not consider our enemies to be almighty, that they are destined to win. I am talking especially about our foreign enemies. They also have an abundance of their own problems. If we will be able to use their problems to our advantage, if we will be able to act in an adequate way, not like right now, when they just laugh about us and all the actions of our leadership are perfectly predictable, when the answers to new weapon deliveries are something like, we will crack all those Abrams tanks like they are walnuts. Those people have said the same thing about HIMARS. I remember them predicting that we would destroy all of them back in May when Ukraine was about to receive them. Will we be able to use our brains? Will we be able to think creatively? If we will, many things in our country would improve very fast. However, if we keep searching for new reasons why we cannot win this war, well, we can write entire books about that. I can name 1,000 different reasons for that, but I don't want to do it. As the saying goes, we shouldn't hold a funeral before it's not over yet.